The night my fiancé told me our wedding depended on sending my children to boarding school, I thought I'd misunderstood him. Then he explained why. His unemployed 36-year-old brother needed a bedroom and workspace in our house. And apparently, the two children who had already lost their father were the ones James thought should make the sacrifice. My name is Violet Toby. I'm 38 years old, and for the past several years, I've been raising my two children alone. They're 10 and 12 now. Their father died a few years ago. After that, life became about keeping things steady. School, work, homework, dinner, bedtime. My kids had already learned far too young that someone they loved could disappear, so I made one promise to myself. Whatever happened next, their home would remain the place where they felt safe. Eventually, we stopped merely surviving. We became a family of three. Not the family we'd expected to be, but ours. Because of everything we'd been through, I was careful about dating. Then I met James. James was 34 when mutual friends introduced us at a barbecue about a year and a half ago. He was outgoing, funny, and seemed genuinely interested when I talked. Most importantly, he didn't flinch when I mentioned my children. "I know we're a package deal," I told him early on. James smiled. "I wouldn't want you any other way." That sentence mattered to me. He made an effort with the kids, too. He'd take them for ice cream, ask about school, and never complained when our plans changed because one of them needed me. The kids remained cautious. They liked James, but they never completely relaxed around him. At the time, I blamed grief. Now I wonder if children simply notice things adults explain away. For the first year, James seemed to understand one absolute rule. My children came first. He even told me he admired it. Then our relationship became more serious, and gradually his language changed. My house became our future house. The children's rooms were cute, but dated. The place apparently needed to feel more adult. None of it sounded sinister individually, but his smile became tighter every time I disagreed. The other recurring subject was his brother, Jake. Jake was 36, and perpetually experiencing what James called a rough patch. He'd lost another job, was living with their parents, drank too much, and blamed everyone else for his problems. James complained about him constantly, then defended him whenever anyone agreed. "He just needs somebody to believe in him," James would say. I didn't argue. Jake wasn't my responsibility. Around our first anniversary, James began dropping hints about marriage. Eventually, I realized I wanted it too. My children were doing well. Our home was stable. And for the first time since their father died, I could imagine letting another person fully into our lives. When James finally proposed, it happened in the park where we'd had one of our first dates. Nothing extravagant. Just James, shaking slightly as he held out a ring. "Violet Toby, will you marry me?" I cried. I said yes. For several minutes, standing beneath those trees with his arms around me, I genuinely believed the hardest chapter of my life was behind me. I didn't know the engagement would be the thing that finally showed me who James was. Wedding planning consumed him almost immediately. Venues, colors, catering, invitations. And suddenly, he became far more interested in changing my house. The first real clash was over our spare room, except it wasn't really spare. The kids painted there. They did homework there. I sometimes worked at the desk after they went to bed. Shelves along one wall held school projects, craft supplies, photographs, and several things their father had made with them. James stood in the doorway one evening. "This could make a great guest room. It's already being used. They can still use it sometimes." "No." His eyebrows lifted. "Just no?" "James, they use this room every day." He stared around it. "We're eventually going to have to make space for everyone." Something about the word everyone bothered me. I just didn't understand why yet. Then Jake came for dinner. He arrived late, smelling faintly of alcohol, and spent most of the meal complaining about his job, his parents, and how unfairly life treated him. My daughter tried talking to him. He barely acknowledged her. Afterward, James somehow called the evening a success. A week later, he casually suggested Jake could stay with us temporarily after the wedding. Where? The spare room. No. Violet. He needs help. Then help him find a job. That's not the same thing. Exactly. The conversation ended badly. After that, something changed between James and my children. He started asking strange questions. Would they ever want to study somewhere else? Wouldn't it be exciting to live with other students? Would they like having more independence? I didn't know about those conversations until my 10-year-old walked into the kitchen one afternoon. Mom? Yeah? What's boarding school? My hand stopped halfway into the dishwasher. I slowly turned around. Why? He shrugged. James said some kids live at school. Every instinct in my body tightened. That evening, I confronted James. He laughed. Violet, come on. We were talking about schools. You specifically mentioned boarding school? They have incredible programs. They're 10 and 12. I wasn't enrolling them. Then don't plant the idea in their heads. His face changed. I was trying to have a conversation with them. Then talk about soccer, movies, their friends. Don't talk to my children about leaving home. He called me overprotective. I called it parenting. For several days afterward, things were tense but quiet. I convinced myself we'd gotten past it. Then one evening, with both children upstairs doing homework, James sat across from me in the living room. We need to talk. The seriousness in his voice made my stomach drop. Okay, I've been thinking about how things are going to work after we're married. There was that phrase again. I've been thinking. He looked around the room. This house isn't going to work with everyone here. I frowned. We already live here. That's different. How? He hesitated. Then he said it. I think we should seriously consider boarding school for the kids. For several seconds, I couldn't speak. Excuse me? There are fantastic schools, Violet. I've actually researched them. That detail chilled me more than the suggestion. You researched them? They'd get a top-tier education, independence, better opportunities. I stared at the man I was supposed to marry. And what's the real reason? James looked away. That was when I knew. Tell me. He exhaled. If the kids went away during the school year, we'd have more room. For what? For Jake. The room seemed to go completely silent. James continued talking, apparently mistaking my silence for consideration. He could have a bedroom and use the spare room as a workspace until he's back on his feet. I almost laughed. Not because anything was funny, because the alternative was screaming. You want me to send my children away so your unemployed brother can move into their home? Don't phrase it like that. How would you phrase it? I'm talking about helping everyone. My children don't need help leaving their bedrooms. His jaw tightened. Jake is family. I looked toward the ceiling. My children were directly above us. No. My family is upstairs. Violet. They lost their father. This house is where they finally feel safe again. And you're asking me to remove them from it because a 36-year-old man can't hold down a job. You're being short-sighted. And you're out of your mind. James stood. I am trying to build a future with you. Then why does your future require my children to disappear? That stopped him. Only for a second. Then his expression hardened. If you can't make room for my family, maybe we need to reconsider the wedding. I stared at him. Are you threatening to cancel our wedding? I'm saying marriage requires compromise. My children aren't a compromise. Then maybe you need to decide what's more important. He walked away before I answered. But the answer was already there. 2 mornings later, someone hammered on my front door while I was making pancakes. I opened it. Jake stood outside carrying a duffel bag. Morning. I stared at the bag. What are you doing here? James said you guys were working out the room situation. My blood went cold. What room situation? Jake smiled. You know. For when I move in. Behind me, I heard my 12-year-old stop halfway down the stairs, and suddenly I understood something far worse than James's ultimatum. He hadn't been asking for my permission. He'd already started making plans. I stepped outside and pulled the door almost shut behind me. "You're not moving in." Jake blinked. "James said." "I don't care what James said. He told me you two were figuring out the details." "There are no details. There is no arrangement. You need to leave." Before Jake could answer, the front door opened behind me. "James." He looked at Jake, then at me. For half a second, panic crossed his face. Then he said something that told me everything. "Jake, you're early." "Early, not unexpected. Early." I turned toward James. "You knew he was coming." "Violet, let's not do this outside. Did you tell him he could move into my house?" "I told him we were discussing it." Jake shifted awkwardly. "You said it was basically handled." James shot him a look. That was all the confirmation I needed. I sent my children upstairs. Then I faced them both. "You made plans to move your brother into my house after I explicitly told you no." "Our house once we're married," James corrected. "No. My house now. Their home now." And I said no. Jake dropped his bag beside the couch. "Can everybody relax? I don't need much." "Pick up your bag." "What?" "Pick it up and leave." Jake looked toward James as though he expected him to override me. James lowered his voice. "Violet, you're embarrassing him." I stared at him. "My children just watched a grown man arrive with luggage because you promised him space in their home, and you're worried about Jake being embarrassed?" James didn't answer. I pointed toward the door. "Jake, go." Jake grabbed his bag and left. The second the door closed, James exploded. "You humiliated my brother. He showed up expecting to move into my children's home. Because he's desperate. And that gives you the right to make decisions behind my back?" "I knew you wouldn't even consider it." "I did consider it. For about 3 seconds. Then I remembered I'm a mother." He stopped. "See? That's exactly the problem. Everything is always about the kids." Something inside me went completely still. "They're my children. And I'm supposed to become your husband. Which means you're supposed to become part of this family, not compete with it." "I'm not competing with anyone." "Then why are you trying to remove them?" His face tightened. "Boarding school isn't punishment." "This isn't about boarding school. It's about the fact that you looked at 2 children who lost their father and decided their stability mattered less than giving Jake somewhere free to live." James shook his head. "You're twisting everything." "No. I'm finally seeing it clearly." He crossed his arms. "If you refuse to compromise on this, I don't know how we're supposed to get married." There it was. The threat he thought would make me afraid. Instead, I looked at the man I'd planned to spend my life with and suddenly saw every conversation differently. He hadn't been imagining how to join our family. He'd been calculating how to rearrange it. "You're right," I said. James frowned. "What?" "We shouldn't get married." For the first time, he had nothing to say. I slipped the engagement ring from my finger. "Violet, don't be ridiculous." "I'm not." "You're ending our engagement over one disagreement?" "I'm ending it because you tried to make decisions about my children behind my back." I placed the ring on the coffee table. James stared at it. "You're actually choosing them over me?" The question told me everything. "They were never supposed to be competing with you." I opened the front door. "You should go." He stared at me, apparently waiting for me to soften. I didn't. At the doorway, he turned. "You're going to regret making a permanent decision while you're angry." I'm not angry anymore. That was true. I was done. After James left, I locked the door. My children were halfway down the stairs. My youngest looked worried. "Is James mad?" I swallowed. "James and I aren't getting married anymore." Then my oldest asked quietly, "Do we have to go to that school?" That question hurt more than anything James had said. I crossed the room and hugged them. "No. No one is sending you anywhere." My youngest wrapped both arms around me, and I felt his whole body relax. That was when I knew there was nothing left to reconsider. The wedding was over. 3 days later, James called. "So I assume you're canceling everything?" "Yes." Then we need to talk about the deposits. He wanted me to reimburse the caterer deposit because I was supposedly the one canceling. I'd already paid more toward the venue, flowers, and invitations. I'm not paying you back, James. You're the one who ended the engagement, after you gave me an ultimatum involving my children. He threatened small claims court. I told him to do whatever he thought he needed to do. Then came messages from people who'd heard his version, that I'd humiliated Jake and canceled the wedding because I refused to help his struggling family. One relative called to tell me I should have made a sacrifice. Did James tell you what the sacrifice was? Silence. He wanted me to send my 10 and 12-year-old children to boarding school so Jake could move into their home. A long pause. Oh. Yeah. Oh. I stopped defending myself after that. The people who mattered already knew me. About a week later, my oldest found me putting away dishes. Mom? Yeah? Can I tell you something without you getting sad? Always. She hesitated. I'm kind of glad James isn't going to live here. My chest tightened. Why? He kept talking like everything was going to change when you got married. What kind of things? Our rooms, our schedules. He said we'd have to learn that you couldn't always put us first anymore. I slowly set the plate down. When did he say that? A few times. She looked worried. Was I supposed to tell you? I pulled her against me. No, sweetheart. And suddenly the breakup didn't feel like something I'd lost. It felt like something I'd discovered just in time. James came by 2 days later for his remaining belongings. At the door, he stopped. You'll regret this. You had a chance to build something better and threw it away because you couldn't let go of the life you had before me. For once, his words didn't hurt. No, James. I looked toward the stairs. I protected the life my children still have. He left. I thought that was the end. A week later, Jake texted me. You're a spineless bitch for what you did to James. I have things in that house that belong to me. I might come get them myself. Don't make me force my way in. I read it twice, then looked across the kitchen at my children eating breakfast. This wasn't family drama anymore. It was a threat. I didn't answer Jake. I took a screenshot. Then I changed every lock. For several days, nothing happened. Then a mutual friend called. Have you heard what happened with Jake? No. He stole from James. After our breakup, James had doubled down on trying to rescue his brother. Jake needed money, somewhere to stay, another chance to get back on his feet. Eventually, James gave him enough access to his personal information that Jake managed to get into one of his accounts. Thousands disappeared. So did Jake. When I heard that, I didn't feel vindicated. Mostly, I felt tired. This was the man James had wanted my children displaced for. 3 nights later, James knocked on my door. He looked terrible. Wrinkled clothes, dark circles beneath his eyes, none of the confidence he'd carried during our engagement. Jake cleaned me out. I heard. I don't know what I'm supposed to do, Violet. I've got bills coming up, wedding expenses we already lost, and now this. I waited. Then came the sentence I somehow knew was coming. I need your help. For a moment, I remembered the James I'd fallen in love with. Then I remembered my son asking what boarding school was, my daughter telling me James had warned them I couldn't always put them first, and Jake standing on my porch with a duffel bag because James had already promised him space inside our home. No. James blinked. Violet. No. You're seriously going to leave me like this? We're not together, James. I thought you cared about me. I did. Then how can you be this cold? I stared at him. You wanted me to send my children away to make room for the man who just stole from you. He looked down. I was trying to help my brother. And I was protecting my children. I made a mistake. Maybe that was the closest thing to an apology I was ever going to get. But it was too late. You made your choice before I ever made mine. You chose Jake over the family you claimed you wanted to join. I'm not cleaning up the consequences. I stepped backward. I hope you figure things out, but you need to leave. For several seconds he stood there, Then he turned and walked away. This time, watching him leave didn't hurt. Eventually, people learned what James's version of compromise actually meant. Boarding school, my children losing their rooms, Jake moving in, then Jake threatening me before stealing thousands from his own brother. I didn't campaign to clear my name. I didn't need to. The truth did that on its own. But the part that mattered most wasn't what happened to James. It was what didn't happen to my children. Their bedrooms stayed theirs. Their routines didn't change. And the spare room remained covered in school projects, markers, photographs, and art supplies. One evening, I walked past it and found both kids sitting on the floor, surrounded by paper and a ridiculous amount of glitter. My daughter looked up. "Mom, don't freak out." I looked at the glitter embedded in the rug. "I'm already freaking out." They laughed. So did I. Months earlier, James had stood in that doorway and seen wasted space. That was when everything finally clicked. He'd been looking at our home and asking what could be removed. I looked at it and saw what had survived. Maybe I missed some warning signs. James didn't walk into my life announcing that he wanted my children pushed aside. It happened gradually. A comment about the house, a suggestion about a room, a conversation about independence. Then a demand disguised as compromise. Until one day, he felt comfortable asking me to send my children away. The wedding never happened. Jake never moved in. And my children never spent a single night at boarding school. James thought threatening to cancel our wedding would force me to choose him. Instead, he gave me the easiest choice I've ever made. My children were never something I was willing to negotiate. I didn't lose my future when I took off that engagement ring. I protected it. And every night when I lock the front door and hear my children laughing somewhere inside the home James wanted them to leave, I'm reminded that canceling that wedding wasn't the end of my family. It was how I kept it intact.